Tansei, good evening. I'm Chris Nachkite. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. The Assembly of First Nations winter meeting in Ottawa wrapped up on Thursday. 7 cabinet ministers, including Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne, held a panel discussion with First Nations leaders. Similar to what the Prime Minister said the day before, they focused on engaging and partnering with First Nations in the economy. APTN's Fraser Needham starts us off.
The Finance Minister stressed these are challenging times economically, and the government wants First Nations to be part of the solution.
Indigenous partnership is essential to speeding up major projects, unlocking economic growth and strengthening Canada's position at home and abroad. And the only way to do that is to do it together.
Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Rebecca Alty echoed this point of view.
With this budget, we were really working on putting forward measures that strengthen First Nations' economic power and autonomy. We're investing in capacity, expanding access to capital, and making sure opportunities don't bypass First Nations.
Indigenous Services Minister Mandy Galmasti said the government values critical services delivered to First Nations. She explained that's why her department only got a 2% funding cut in the recent budget compared to deeper cuts in other departments. But at the same time, Galmasti said her department is looking for efficiencies.
We have the task to innovate and transform service delivery. We are doing that by moving into a new mode of offering high-quality services that are easier to access, faster to navigate, in some spaces modernized, where communities are able to receive through a one-window, single approach.
Well, the government is eager to partner with First Nations on certain economic projects. It is clear others are not deemed to be in what the Liberals define as the national interest. Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation Chief Greg Sarrazin asked if the One Economy Act could be used to address the massive First Nations infrastructure gap.
Will you commit to closing the First Nation infrastructure gap through the Major Projects Office, Building Canada Act, or other mechanisms?
And was told politely no by Alty.
It's not quite designed that way, just because it's about more like the Impact Assessment Act and other permitting and regulatory processes. And so a lot of the challenges in developing community infrastructure, that act wouldn't address.
Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Some First Nations are feeling they do not have a seat at the table with the federal government, including with the Assembly of First Nations. Frustration towards both parties was evident at the AFN's Special Chiefs meeting in Ottawa today. However, 3 chiefs representing Treaties 6, 7, and 8 had a closed-door meeting with the Prime Minister. APTN's Savannah Craig reports.
Prime Minister Mark Carney signed a memorandum of understanding with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith 1 week ago. Some First Nations governments are feeling left out of the equation. Now, some chiefs are finally getting a seat at the table.
There was a few things that were talked about, the pipeline, the MOU between the federal government and Alberta, the water issue.
Chief Vernon Watchmaker was one of the 3 chiefs who were invited to the closed-door meeting with Prime Minister Carney late Wednesday afternoon.
It's been a tough one because we heard many times before the good working together, working more closely with the First Nations, and nothing really came of it. But what we're looking for is that in good faith, like it says in a treaty, in good faith, that we work with you.
But some chiefs still haven't had the chance to speak with Prime Minister Carney.
Chief Jacko, please. We understand.
Frustration over the inability to share concerns with the Prime Minister, a similar sentiment other chiefs have had.
I'm sorry, Chief Diabo. Chief Tamara?
You get 20 minutes, but we get 2.
Many say they've traveled long,
I come many miles.
waiting for their chance to speak with Prime Minister Mark Carney after radio silence.
We talk about nation to nation. Nobody speaks for my nation but me. My people put me here. I have unanswered questions, and Prime Minister, you told me you're going to come to my territory.
including Cold Lake First Nation Chief Kelsey Jacko, who was not invited to the Prime Minister's closed-door meeting.
When the Prime Minister says talk to nation to nation, I expect to have a conversation with him. I have unanswered emails going to him. He told me he is going to come to my territory 3 times, and it just seems like every time I'm trying to have a conversation with him, I have to fight just to say some words.
With a divisive pipeline project on the table, some First Nations see it as a pivotal time to have their voices heard.
They're going to be building a 400 kilometer pipeline, and they're going to be storing it in my backyard. And, we're not going to go anywhere, and, we're going to have to deal with it for 100 years to come. Right?
The concern extends to how the sharing of resources will benefit their communities.
We agreed to share this land with you. It also means we shared the resources.
A lot of money just goes to the municipalities back for us, like right next door to us, goes to the cities, go to the provinces, and we're left out of the equations. We're in a housing crisis. We have needs too.
For some chiefs in Treaty 6, 7, and 8, they're also being unheard at the Assembly of First Nations.
We come to this assembly and you guys say it's our meeting. We're still under the colonial approach where you guys control the mics.
First Nations in Alberta haven't had regional representation at the AFN since 2021.
Treaty 8 had decided to pull out of the AFN, and so Treaty 6 and 7 did not want to make a decision in regards to the replacement of the regional chief. But that's been since some time ago, but it hasn't really been brought to the forefront.
Chief Watchmaker says he hopes the issue will be addressed at the next Assembly of Treaty Chiefs, a quarterly meeting between Treaty 6, 7, and 8 in Alberta. Savannah Craig, APTN National News, Ottawa.
The inquiry into the treatment, experiences, and outcomes of Innu in the child protection system resumed formal hearings this week, coming virtually from the Ramada Hotel in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. The 3-day inquiry began with testimony from officials from the Innu Roundtable Secretariat. They testified that education is needed to build capacity, so Innu-led family services improves outcomes for Innu children and families. Researchers and academics also talked about how multi-generational trauma had contributed to poverty, poor housing, addictions, and mental health, which in turn led to poor outcomes for families and children, and how Innu-led services must support not only Innu children, but the entire family. That is what the Innu have been saying for decades.
And we've got the negative connotation that children need protection primarily from their parents, because we're very much into the parent blaming. But they also need protection from the biggest perpetrator of maltreatment towards them is society in general.
30 years ago, when the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples visited Shahajit, the late Rose Gregoire told them, while speaking about social services as it was then called, "We are not stupid. We can do the jobs ourselves. With probably some training, we can certainly do this."
And that inquiry continues in January, and the final report is expected to be completed next fall. Métis Nation Saskatchewan has signed 2 agreements with uranium mining company Denison Mines. The agreements ensure Métis voices are included in decisions about mining in northern Saskatchewan. M&S signed an impact benefit agreement and an exploration agreement with Denison, ensuring Métis citizens are involved in the underground mine through training, employment, and royalties. Denison's Wheeler River project is proposed for the western edge of the Athabasca Basin in northern Saskatchewan. Last April, M&S filed the Northwest Land Claim against the federal and provincial governments to seek land and resource rights for Métis people who have long lived in the area. The Wheeler River project is located within that claim area. M&S President Glenn McCollum says it is essential that Indigenous voices remain included in northern development projects.
We've been talking for quite a few years in regards to the importance of that engagement, and to get to this point of where we're signing the agreement is really something that we've looked forward to.
And Denison is in the final stages of approval for the Wheeler project, and if greenlit, the project could begin as early as April 2026. Our Truth in Politics panel is up next with more updates from this week's AFN Assembly in Ottawa. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. A First Nation community in northwestern Ontario has been named one of the largest shareholders of the First Nations Bank of Canada, or FNBC, which made a major economic announcement this week at the Assembly of First Nations annual meeting in Ottawa. First Nations Bank of Canada CEO Bill Lomax announced that Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation now holds 10% of the bank. Wabigoon Lake Chief Clayton Wetolainen called their $12.8 million ownership stake a groundbreaking step forward in financial sovereignty for First Nations. FNBC and their newest stakeholder says the deal comes with a social mandate of serving communities. Lomax is hopeful that all FNBC stakeholders will allow the bank to invest more than $200 million of capital in First Nations communities. Chief Wetolainen says the ownership will allow his community to progress in developments that support self-determination.
The impact on our community is a tremendous opportunity. You know, we have a lot of entrepreneurs in the community. We have infrastructure projects. We have a roundhouse that we're planning, also a cultural center. So looking for that infrastructure catalyst of financing is tremendous.
When you look at all the nation building type work that a nation like this would want to do, all of those require income, all of those require money. So they want to have a good investment that will bring a return to them so that they can pay for things like language revitalization, elder care, housing, all these good things that you need as part of your community. So it has very much has real world impacts.
Time for this week's Truth in Politics panel. As you know, the AFN is busy with their winter assembly this week in Ottawa. The Prime Minister was also there just days ago to talk about the proposed pipeline linking Alberta to the northwest coast of British Columbia. Last week, Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith signed a memorandum of understanding to build one. Pascal Strategies' Jennifer Lewitz is here, and so is Winnipeg Free Press columnist Nigon Sinclair. Your turn to go first this week, Nigon. Is it safe to say that the AFN stuck to a rights-based agenda this week, as opposed to internal infighting, by addressing the Prime Minister in person about his proposal for a new pipeline from Alberta to the West Coast?
Well, it's hard to say that they're unanimous, but whoever was there was unanimous. Of course, missing major contingencies or constituencies, around from Alberta. Which of course has a lot to do with the Alberta-Canada Memorandum of Understanding involving this pipeline. So what we've got who's ever there at the AFN, which is probably the majority. And not only is it the majority, but it also includes a very key area of BC First Nations, and for the rest of the chiefs in the country to stand with those BC First Nations, to stand up for Indigenous rights and to say that there is simply not going to be some sort of dictation from the Canadian government or the Alberta government on any resource project without First Nations involvement from the outset, not some sort of consultative role way down the line, but that First Nations have to be involved in a key area involving even just becoming, let's say, the proponent or becoming at the very first stage of even the idea coming to the surface. So would I say that there is a rights-based commitment? Yes. I think, though, it's very indicative of some of the toxicity that the Canadian government is revisiting after 10 years of very progressive steps. This Carney government is very much looking much more like Stephen Harper than Justin Trudeau.
Is that how you see it, Jennifer? And where does the Assembly trying to oppose this national building project leave us, especially with just about every Alberta chief not being at the Assembly and the Assembly passing a resolution to reject the pipeline?
Well, it's kind of hard to understand, at this point, how the government can talk about consultation in the way that they have been when we saw Bill C-5 go forward as fast as it did, and then the conversations around a pipeline come immediately afterwards. I did watch some of the House of Commons clippings where, they were saying we would never build a pipeline without consultation, but you just rammed through Bill C-5. So on the AFN front, it's how effective are you actually in this space anymore if these things are being rammed through as quickly as they are? And, we had that roundtable discussion or whatever it was where all the chiefs were brought into Ottawa, during the height of Bill C-5, and AFN kind of facilitated some of that, but it was just so rushed. It was one day. And I think it's at the point now where we are seeing nations across Canada assert their own jurisdiction and say, you know what, these bigger bodies or political lobbying groups aren't actually speaking for us anymore. Go back to the grassroots. And it's going to be difficult, but just start with the treaties. Treaty 6, Treaty 8, Treaty 4, go back to the nations within the treaties. That's where it all starts. And I think the higher level some of these different political organizations get, the more, out of touch they seem to be getting. And I don't know if AFN even has the political weight anymore to even stop a pipeline, even if they wanted to. I think that this is all going to be back to the grassroots, back to the members, and to the chiefs of these nations that are actively advocating, as we've seen in Alberta.
And Niigaan, Chief Linda DeBassage and quite a few others were very vocal, telling the Prime Minister that boil water advisories would be a no-go in Ottawa or Toronto. This is a bread and butter issue that did make it to the floor. We know all about this, but will the Prime Minister actually do something other than give more promises?
I just want to revisit just a second ago what Jennifer said. This is literally the most liberal-friendly AFN you could ever have. When you have National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Neepanak, who's the former chair of the Aboriginal People's Caucus of the Liberal Party. Like, name me a more liberal-friendly AFN. And yet you still have these issues involving First Nations being an afterthought for many of these resource projects. Now, getting to the boil water advisories, can we be done with the idea that boil water advisories is some kind of policy initiative of the federal government? Why don't we just treat Indigenous peoples like human beings? Like, let's try that out. Let's stop saying, oh, well, we're going to deal with boil water advisories. Like, how about we just don't even converse about it and you just do it? Because the fact is that First Nations, in theory anyways, according to the Canadian government, are part of the Canadian state, part of the Canadian government legally under the Indian Act. And so they should be treated like every other Canadian, to be provided just decent infrastructure in which you can turn on your tap in your house, have decent water. Not only that, water you can drink, water you can use for your brushing your teeth, water that you can use to raise your family and to thrive like every other. The fact that we're even talking about this as some sort of goodwill of the government to deal with boil water advisories, that's what they're talking about when they say this is a no-go issue. Like, why are we even, when the Prime Minister is being asked, okay, why is consultation, why are you not consulting, why are you not including us with resource development projects till way in the back end? And his answer is, well, we're going to deal with boil water advisories. That's not an equal or. Like, there should have been dealt with years ago. It should have been dealt with under the government of Justin Trudeau, and arguably he did deal with 2/3 of them, but we've still got a third left to go. And we have to treat Indigenous peoples like human beings. Like, how many times do we have to say this on this panel, in the Canadian government, pretty much every single day? Why do we have to keep saying this over and over and over again until finally people just stop saying this is some sort of gift and say that, and it's just a right?
Jennifer and Niigaan, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you both for your time.
Yeah,
thank you.
We have more news after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Crystal Shackley sent in this stunning photo. Looks like a cold, brisk morning as the heat is still coming off the ground and meeting that cool winter air. Thanks for sharing that picture with us, Crystal. Send us your pictures to share at aptn.ca, and don't forget to include any helpful details such as when and where the picture was taken. Time now for tomorrow's weather forecast. Me, Gwetch, for staying with us. Halifax -1 and clear skies -4 in Charlottetown. Nuujooak -6, La Grande River sunny and -12. Quebec City -10, Montreal -5. Sarnia -1, London 0. Timmins -5, Sioux Lookout -9. Churchill sunny and -17, God's Lake -13. Dauphin -7, Princess Harbor -8. Sunny in Saskatoon at -9, Regina -4. -21 in Stony Rapids, La Ronge -12. Fort Chipewyan -20, Fort McMurray -18. Lethbridge 0, Medicine Hat 0. Quesnel 3, Kamloops 5. minus 19 in Fort Nelson Smithers 2. A Burr, minus 30 in Old Crow. Rock River, minus 28. Minus 24 in Yellowknife and Sunny. Trout Lake, minus 22. Minus 21 in Sax Harbor. Fort McPherson, minus 28. Baker Lake, minus 20. Whale Cove, clear skies and minus 21. And Clyde River, minus 12. Iqaluit, minus 8 and sunny. Nation to Nation host Karen Pugliese spent a good chunk of this week at the AFN's Chiefs Assembly. Here's a preview of what she heard from the AFN for tonight's episode.
Coming up on Nation to Nation, we're bringing you some key moments from the AFN Special Chiefs Assembly. We'll dig into where Bill S2 is headed and explain the disagreement on how to end the second-generation cutoff. We've also got Prime Minister Mark Carney's first appearance at an AFN Special Assembly. Despite all the reassurances, some chiefs just still aren't sure he supports free, prior, and informed consent. And we'll check in with Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepinak on what she's thinking about how this year's assembly has played out. We've got that coming up in just a matter of minutes.
APTN Investigates also returns this week with an all-new episode. Journalist Christopher Reed looks into a recent eruption of residential school denialism. Fired academic Francis Whittleson has been showing up on university campuses to question aspects of the history of residential schools in Canada. Here's a preview.
Achieving reconciliation, as I observed, is like climbing a mountain. It will not always be easy. There will be storms, there will be obstacles. Our goal is a just one, and it is also necessary for our children.
Canada's Indian residential school era has become a central part of our national identity. The federal policy to kill the Indian and the child has had lasting impacts still being felt to this day. More recently, the discovery of what are believed to be unmarked graves of children has brought the discussion surrounding truth and reconciliation back to the forefront. But there has been an eruption of late of what some academics call residential school denialism.
We're proceeding on the basis of a falsehood. The lie that 215 bodies were found at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. The remains of 215 children have not been confirmed.
We had heard that Francis Whittleson, an alleged denialist, was coming to Winnipeg to speak at local university. During her 2-day visit, we watched the effect her words and presence had on the Indigenous community, and saw that while having to push back against denialism is an unwanted task for knowledge keepers and academics, it's a necessary one at this moment.
And you can catch APTN Investigates Dismantling Denialism airing this Saturday on APTN. And that's your evening newscast for this Thursday. We're back again tomorrow for your daytime newscast. Please join us then. From all of us at APTN National News, hi miigwech masicho. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next day.